Hi, I'm Zibby Owens, and I am the host of this podcast, Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books. I am also a newly minted USA Today best-selling author of the novel Blank. I've created a whole community of book lovers around this podcast, a publishing company, reading retreats, a bookstore, and more. Learn more at zibbymedia.com or follow me on social at Zibby Owens or join the community at Zibby Readers. Eruption is a very special book which debuted at #1 on the New York Times bestseller list, which was co-authored by Michael Crichton and James Patterson. You will probably know that Michael Crichton passed away in 2008, but his widow, Sherri, came on the podcast to talk to Jim Patterson and me about her finding the manuscript and the path to collaborating with Jim on this title. So here are both of their bios, and know that Sherri, his widow, is the one who's on the podcast with me and Jim. Okay, Michael Crichton was the author of the best-selling novels The Terminal Man, The Great Train Robbery, Jurassic Park, Sphere, Disclosure, Prey, State of Fear, Next, and Dragon Teeth, among many others. His books have sold more than 200 million copies worldwide, have been translated into 40 languages, and have provided the basis for 15 feature films. He wrote and directed Westworld, The Great Train Robbery, Runaway, Looker, Coma, and created the hit television series ER. Crichton remains the only writer to have had a #1 book, movie, and TV show in the same year. James Patterson is the most popular storyteller of our time. He is the creator of unforgettable characters and series, including Alex Cross, The Women's Murder Club, Jane Effing Smith, and Maximum Ride, and of breathtaking true stories about the Kennedys, John Lennon, and Princess Diana, as well as our military heroes, police officers, and ER nurses. He has co-authored #1 best-selling novels with Bill Clinton and Dolly Parton, told the story of his own life in James Patterson by James Patterson, which, by the way, I loved, and he came on the podcast and we talked about that too, and received an Edgar Award, 10 Emmy Awards, the Literarian Award from the National Book Foundation, and the National Humanities Medal. As for Michael's widow, Sherri Crichton, Sherri's role in this book is incredibly special. She was pregnant at the time of Michael's tragic and untimely death, and it took her over a decade to find a co-author worthy of honoring her husband's legacy and final passion project. She beautifully speaks to the significance of this book and magnitude of this moment to both her and her son on a personal level, as well as to the millions of Crichton superfans throughout the world. She and Jim have created a close bond and friendship in the making of this book. Welcome so much to both Sherri Crichton and James Patterson here to discuss Eruption, which is co-authored by Michael Crichton, the late Michael Crichton, and James Patterson. Anyway, that was a long introduction. Welcome to both of you. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you.
Thank you, Zib.
Oh my gosh, Eruption. This was like, I'm so afraid. I didn't know. I mean, I thought COVID was bad. Let's just put it that way. And then you read this book and you're like, oh, we're so vulnerable. It's ridiculous, is how I feel about it.
Yeah.
Okay, so tell me about your collaboration. Sherri, I read your author's note of finding the manuscript, but tell me the whole story of how you all teamed up.
Well, I mean, really, the short story is I found that partial manuscript very early on. It was about in 2010. And it was so emotional for me because of Michael's connection to the island and me always hearing about this volcano story. He wouldn't go into detail, characters, nothing. I just knew about it. So it was very emotional after he passed that I felt so close to him through this book. And it went on a year pilgrimage to find all the pieces. I mean, years of pilgrimage to find all the pieces. And then when it was finally put together, where I finally felt like I am ready to launch this with the right partner, I was like, now what? Now who? And all of a sudden I was like, well, let's go to the top. Let's go to the top.
He's not doing anything.
He's not doing anything. He's bored. He's like, let's find out if James Patterson is even a Michael Crichton fan, even if he has time, would this be intriguing to him? And Jim encompasses everything I wanted for this book, like an incredible storyteller, fast paced, you love his characters and you just buy into Jim's books. And I was like, that could be phenomenal. These two powerhouses meeting on the page and then the big question is, let's reach out to Jim and let's see if it would be something that he would be interested in.
So I
And
was reached out to, and there I was. And Sherri sent me what Michael had written. I said, well, let me read it quickly. And I did. And I called her back. I said, if you want me, I'm in. The reasons were a lot of reasons, really. One was I'm a big Michael Crichton fan, have been, and I just reread 4 or 5 of his books again. But I'd read all of his novels, a couple of the screenplays, his nonfiction, ER, we're all aware of. And I just thought he was just a great storyteller and had kind of done something to this kind of fiction that hadn't been done before, which is bringing in this intelligence and the science, or in the case of the Great Train Robbery, an incredible amount of history. So I definitely wanted to try. I love the challenge of, because I don't write with a lot of science, and to see if I could keep a story going, with a lot of science in it. And I got my own researcher then, because to help with the parts that hadn't been written yet. And then talking to Sherri, I mean, it was, we were kind of on the same page about a lot of things. I had lost, as you know, the love of my life in my 30s, initial first love of my life. So we had that, and it just kind of clicked, and we were very comfortable with each other right away. And I love the challenge, and I thought this could be one of those, and I think it turned out that way, in my opinion, anyway. One of those kinds of books you don't see them anymore.
Mm-hmm.
That sort of like, wow, blockbuster, just because the story's so big. I mean, it has this double. I mean, you take a book like Day of the Jackal, and it's got one engine. Will the jackal get the gall or not? This had these 2 big engines. One, this volcano that's like, oh my God, it could be the worst volcano eruption ever. But there's something worse on the island, which is the waste materials. And Michael, as Sherri can talk about Michael, the way he was always, a decade ahead of everybody else in terms of his research and things that he was curious about.
well, to that, yes, exactly, Jim. To that point, I mean, Michael, he was so prolific in his thinking, and I look, it was during the pandemic. Every time on Google, like those Google alerts, I kept seeing Michael Crichton, because of Andromeda Strain, which he wrote 50 years ago about a pandemic. And he was talking about DNA before we were even considering, unless you were a doctor, you really aren't talking about DNA when he created Jurassic. So when this book came, and it was like, it was so heartfelt to me, because I knew how much Hawaii meant to him. And then, like Jim said, it's got these 2 hooks and you cannot put it down. I was like, oh my gosh, this is going to require, first of all, for me to do the necessary research to go back into all of his papers and drives and whatever, and find everything I possibly can, because this book meant that much to Michael. And what I found out is he researched it since the 70s. He started writing it in the 90s. And from the 90s forward, he kept going back to polish and polish and polish. But he didn't move past that initial partial manuscript. So the idea that I could partner with somebody as special as James Patterson, and him, I say this with all my heart, be so genuinely like connected to the material, but connected to the research, and such a genuine man of integrity. Like, he wanted to do right by Michael and take that story where it needed to go. And in his words, I'm not going to say it for you, he's like, Sherri, I just need to know how this ends. So,
Yeah, right. Zibby, the other thing is, the subject matter of this is so current, because man keeps messing with nature.
Yes.
And in all ways, whether it's because we were dumping waste into the ocean, which we kind of stopped, but we're putting it somewhere. So that continues, and it's very, very dangerous. And then, in terms of global warming or whatever you believe in, something's going on there. And you feel it every time you take a plane right now, because you're always bouncing around. You see it with, nature's just acting in weirder ways. And there have been more earthquakes of late, and more volcano activity, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So, I think it's a very current kind of a story to read as well. It's not like an old-fashioned story, which I love.
So how close to the end of the world do you 2 think we actually are? Do you think the whole world is going to come to an end? It sometimes feels like that.
Well, today feels like one of those days, right? Or yesterday, weird stuff in the whatever, you know.
I feel like, and this is something that really Jim and I had so much fun with when we were dancing on the pages. Really, it was Michael and Jim dancing. I was like, I had the front seat, which was quite phenomenal. But nature does find a way. And it is truly that with this human interference, it can be weaponized if it's in the wrong hands. And I think that we all have to. Michael used to always, he was so, this is like the foundation of his books. He would always set up these what if scenarios. And those scenarios really make us, if you're engaged in the material, it wakes us up to say, oh my gosh, what if? So on another level, I think what he was doing as he was setting the stage with this book was really like, pay attention. Pay attention, get out in nature, make sure that we are, communities gathered together, that we're fighting for the right cause. That we're really,
and Zibby, it's a collaboration, obviously, between myself and Michael and Sherri. But this book is really about collaboration as well. And in terms of your question, how long before the end of the world? If we don't learn how to collaborate, bad things are going to happen. Because during the next 10, 15, 20 years, there's going to be a lot of things, water shortages, things that are just going to really, and if we don't learn to collaborate, the positive thing about the COVID experience was, oh my God, in a year, people collaborated and got a vaccine out there. I think that's very positive. The sad thing is we don't seem to have learned anything. We still don't get together. We just keep going onto these little islands and drifting apart and fighting each other rather than okay, the border is a problem. Okay, fine, let's collaborate and figure out what's the fairest, best thing we can do there. Whatever problems America is facing, we would do better if we could collaborate instead of fighting each other.
Very true.
I think.
Very true. Oh my gosh. When it came to character development and there's so many characters in here, different scientists, different people experiencing, whether it's missing their children post-divorce or post having their wife leave, or missing, you're longing for a career, or people who have had strokes, or people, there's like lots of physical things, physical and emotional things sort of in everybody's way, in addition to the big challenges here. How did that come about? And was that something that was already written, or Jim, was it something that you decided to infuse into the narrative?
That's a total mixed bag. Some of the characters, Mac obviously was there. Mac's family situation was there. Several of the scientists were there. I don't want to get that specific, but there were some new. The Musk-like character that was new, and the two crazies, volcanists. But a lot of it was there, and then there were some new characters that were added as well.
Wow.
But an interesting thing, and Sherri and I talk about this a lot, is one of the things we wanted to do was to try to make it seamless. So I challenge anyone to find that point where Michael stopped writing and I started writing. I think that's kind of a cool thing. I remember years ago when I did a book with President Clinton, and in England, somebody went out and they did computers and all this stuff, and they nailed down what they thought. They were absolutely sure these are the chapters that Clinton did, and these are the ones and they were totally wrong. Totally wrong. But they were so sure about it,
Sherri, how does it feel bringing this book into the world and getting people talking? Not that they've ever stopped talking about the genius of your late husband, but just to have to talk about that every day. Is it a comfort or is it a trigger?
It's not a trigger. It is a comfort. It's really exciting. And to see this book be completed in the way it was, I think, I'm so proud of it. My son is proud of it. I'm just so grateful to Jim for being the phenomenal partner that he was. But this material was doing no good tucked away in the archive. It felt like a really selfish endeavor to just leave it to me, just to hold this back. And so it really does, I say freedom because it's out there. I love the idea of thinking of Michael on every exploration that he would do for every volcano and all of his research, for it to have the integrity of someone as talented as Jim finish it and it be so beautifully told and the message still stay on par with what Michael had written. It warms my heart.
One of the crazy things, when you get the haters out there and they go, oh, it was all about the money. It's not about the money. You see
No.
behind Sherri there? That's a Jasper Johns behind there. She doesn't need the money. I don't need the money. We did it because we wanted to do, we thought there was a potentially really, really, really good story here to tell. And hopefully now we're talking to different people out in Hollywood, hopefully a movie as well. But our thing with the movie is not, we had a couple of people that came to us and they said, oh, we're really great at these disaster things and we can do it and da 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 da. And they wanted to do the same old stuff. And neither one of us wanted to do that. And where we're thinking of partnering now, the whole idea is that it's going to be better. You know, Jurassic Park was it just reinvented that disaster kind of scenario, and that's what we're hoping with the people we're working with. Not about who's going to make the most money, but about we just want to be proud of it. And obviously with Sherri, she wants John Michael, their son, to be proud of it.
And honestly, when I read the book, I'm like, to put myself in the mind even of an actor, I'm like, how great these characters have such depth and levity at the same time. And to be able to play any one of these characters would be, I would just think that would just be a joyride. So
there are some cool parts.
Yes, there's some.
You want to be in the movie, Zibby?
Yeah,
here's what I don't want. I don't want to be in the helicopter on the side of the volcano while it moves and someone's trying to save me and I'm scared of heights. Thank you very much. I'll pass.
There are some bad helicopter scenes. There are a few bad helicopters. We come down hard on helicopters in this book.
Yeah, seriously.
They're called the national bird over in Kauai because they're everywhere now. And it used to frustrate us so much when Michael and I would be out hiking on the trails. And then we put in 12 miles to get to this one spot so that you could oversee all of like Hanalei Bay, or it was out on Alakai Swamp. It's the greatest hike. And maybe it was more like, well, I don't remember how many exact miles, but then out of nowhere, these helicopters would just come zooming in. And it would just disrupt all of nature just because, people want to see it too, but they want to be in that helicopter. So
I went to actually my honeymoon on Hawaii, Lanai and Maui. Tell Zibby about your honeymoon, where you went.
Well, we got married in Kauai, but my honeymoon was in Italy and we had a side trip to Pompeii. I didn't really understand why Michael wanted to take me to Pompeii, but he had
romantic.
Very romantic. We're sitting at the base of Mount Vesuvius and he's telling me about, ash and volcanic activity. And he knew everything, but underneath it all, it was one of the reasons why this is so important to me, because underneath it all is like, a research trip, I see.
That's one of the things where like people really do show you who they are when you first get married. And sometimes you can just like ignore those signs, Well,
it was very smart. He could write the trip off then. How many people can write off their honeymoon?
My honeymoon was in Hawaii also for my first marriage, but I won't hold it against Hawaii. Are you doing anything with the people of Hawaii for this book and all of that? I mean, there's a lot of, language and culture and all of that embedded in the book as well, which was beautiful.
Yeah, I think at this particular, we have all the fingers are out, and we just had a really wonderful podcast the other day. And if what you're asking, if we're going to show up in Hawaii, unfortunately, the two of us together will not be in Hawaii together for this book launch. But I think it is time we really consider firing up the jets and heading.
We did try to be very respectful, and Sherri certainly pushed this because she knows that she spent so much time there. And you'll notice there's a lot of the pigeon speech throughout the book, which Michael had initiated that. And Sherri brought up the notion of in the book where one of the issues is the burial grounds. Mm-hmm. And dealing with the burial grounds is getting in the way of the rescue, which is it's a big problem. Yeah. But there is like that, and then in the coming months, will we try to do some good works there? Probably, yeah.
Giving it out to the people or something. I don't know. I feel like maybe there's some characters who could hold their own in another book after this. Like you could continue something.
Well, we can't say who survives, so we won't. Totally.
I didn't. Did I say a name? I didn't say a name.
There was one character who didn't make it, and that was a controversy. We had to really talk that one through. But that was something that Michael did, and I frequently do. which is to let the reader know no one is safe, including our hero. And toward the end, you really don't know what's going to happen, and I think you have some bad feelings, which I think is great in terms of storytelling.
Is there a reader who is like your ideal reader? You're like, this person has to read this book, or who?
John Michael.
It was John Michael. He read the original pages, and he didn't want to read the chapters as they came in. He was like, I want to wait. He did have, some, words about, as parts of the other creative process with the cover and all of this stuff, which was fun. I wanted to make sure he was a part of it. But when he really finally got the book and he was able to sit down and read it, yes, his endorsement was all I needed.
I love it.
Yeah, he's a really, really smart. I finally met him a week or so ago. Really smart, really tall young guy. And my wife Sue loved it, and so did our son Jack. So that's our other tough audience.
Well, that's wonderful. When you were making the book as propulsive as it is, I know there were a lot of short chapters. There are sort of the structure of the book itself is sort of designed to be consumed readily. And like sometimes the scientific passages are sort of outlined and then sometimes they're embedded, but there's never too much, right, at one time. Is that something like, what are some of the things? Was that one of the things in drafting it that was like, okay, I want to make sure that we don't overwhelm the reader with this type of jargon, or I want to make sure they go to the next chapter quickly, or like, what were some of those major considerations?
Well, you know me, Zibby. I mean, that's kind of what I do. Michael does it too. I would say if Michael had done the whole book, some of the chapters might have been a little longer. That's about the only minor change. He also was very smart about not overwhelming you with the science. He knew when to get off, and he really had a sense. He's a storyteller.
Yeah,
you kind of know when you've said enough, and people are starting to glaze over, and we got to get going here. But and he had that great sense of the whole. I will say that initial helicopter thing. That's the thing that's all Michael.
Wow.
That's all Michael.
That was intense. I was in it, ready to keep going on this ride. And that was gripping.
But I will say that you did it so superbly, Jim, and Michael does it in his books, that you lay in the science to where it's information you actually need to know. And once you finish, once you come off that scientific jargon, you're smarter. You walk away from a book a little smarter. You know a little bit more. Michael was famous for that, where you kind of walk away thinking a little bit more about quantum physics and timeline, or DNA and cloning in some of his other books. But in this, I think the reader will find that they're a little smarter when it comes to knowing volcanic activity and the horrors of toxic waste.
I was tested and my IQ went up 2 points just working on the book. It was kind of cool.
What are, Sherri, the challenges of sort of preserving the canon of work of a legendary author? How do you approach that, and how do you think about it? And
well, there are movies coming too, and more of the movies, from Michael's works. Jurassic, I think there's another one. What are they doing? Is that in pre-production, or are they shooting?
No, I don't think they start shooting until maybe next month or in August. And yes, there's Twisters that's coming out this summer, and there's always something going on. I think that's the most remarkable thing about Michael's work. It is so, it was so brilliantly told and so captivating and so before its time, that it has this legacy of, it's not going out of style. It continues on and continues on. There were so many different elements of it. So really, like in all of Michael's work, it's really doing pieces like this, which are really important for me. It continue to kind of, honor this man that we all, and he had just such a phenomenal cultural footprint. Something along the way, whether children are getting inspired by his books, with reading Jurassic Park or going to the movies, or how he touched people's lives, whether it was ER and people were inspired by that. He really was somebody who was quite inspirational in the way he wrote and the way he told stories. And I think the bottom line is he was always curious. He was just always curious and needed to know the why. And once he was captivated by a subject, he would begin writing. And it was effortless, and it wasn't the job. I think he really enjoyed the research more because he was an adventurer at heart, but he loved it. It was his passion. Writing was truly his passion, which I'm sure it is for Jim. I mean,
I love it. I always say that, I don't work for a living, I play for a living. And, one of the things, Zibby, is I always think our greatest strength is usually our greatest weakness as well. And for me, it's that page turning. I'm going to do these things. I'm keep people. And sometimes I don't dig as deep as I should. Because of Michael's research on this book, I really dug deeper than I usually do. And I think that turned out a better book than some of what I've done.
One of the takeaways from the book for me, in addition to, world crises and all of that, is there was one line about how a lot of the researchers are behind their computers and now they're not even in shape enough to go on these big hikes. Right? Like that is a big takeaway, right? How are we interacting with the world? How are we using our brains? What can we do better? And what are we losing by what we're getting?
Yeah, that's our whole society now. Absolutely.
Well, and Michael wrote in his foreword to the book Micro, and he dedicated that book to John Michael. He wrote in it where we have got to put our devices down. We have become so out of touch with nature, we don't even know what we're fighting for anymore. He encapsulates that with I really do believe if Michael were here today, he would get rid of any interference. He would really push these new generations out in any way that he could. And I'm really hoping that our book, Jim, does that. I hope it really kind of opens, people's eyes and, polishes the lenses to say, let's really pay attention. Let's pay attention.
I love it. So is there anything left to collaborate on? Can you find is there anything else in the archives to exhume or no?
Well, we'll see. We're talking, and at some point, Sherri obviously will do what she does. And in terms of whatever characters survive this book, we'll talk about that. We're going to get this one out and then probably deal with the Hollywood auction in a month or so, or whatever the time frame is, maybe shorter. And then we can see, if something else makes sense for Sherri and for myself.
Yeah, I'll probably be dealing with the Hollywood auction in a month. Most people are. It's just usually in the calendar. So whatever. Okay, well, what advice? I know I've asked you this 100 times, Jim, so you're probably getting sick of it. But when you're giving advice to aspiring authors, give us some advice, or even give advice to people who are not aspiring, but who are trying to write their millionth book, because you've written so many books and they keep getting better. So what is the secret there?
As you know, Zibby, I tend not to give advice. I just kind of talk about what I do, and then people can, for me, outline. And on this book, before we really agreed to do it, I said, let me do an outline for what needs the rest of the book, and showed it to Sherri. And that was something where I think she felt, took a deep breath and said, okay, this is going to be good. So outline, I think is huge. I think it saves people so much time. You'll write a better book in most cases. Maybe not, like Ulysses. I don't know if he used an outline for that, but or certainly for Finnegan's Wake, I'm sure he didn't use an outline. But that's huge to me. And then story is another thing. Just be aware of, you're talking to somebody, you're telling somebody a story. And my thing is always, I think there's one person across from me and I don't want them to get up until I've finished. So that's useful.
I love that. Amazing. Congratulations. It's really good. And I learned a lot too, and thought-provoking and all of that. So congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you,
Zibby, as always.
Thank you. Thanks for listening to Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books. If you love it, please leave a review and follow us on social at Zibby Owens and at Zibby Readers.